and I'll be your moderator for today. As usual, we're more than pleased to bring you this series of webinars, and with us again, returning from previous appearances, is our data analytics guru, Rich Lanza. And in the interest of time, we will not dwell on the bio that you see on me on your screen, but I would like to cordially invite Rich to spend a couple of minutes introducing himself to you with his many qualifications to present this webinar. Rich?
Great, yeah, and thank you, Peter, and thanks everyone for coming today. I have found that taking a look at employee data, be it structured, unstructured, and putting it together is really something that very few people do. And I've noticed, though, there is a lot of focus these days on segregation of duties testing and a lot of testing around that, which we'll talk about. But you know, it's sort of, and in a lot of ways, it ends there from a profiling point of view a lot of times. And what I hope to do today is expand your minds a bit in the use of data from accounts payable, general ledger, payroll, etc., and how you could bring this together. Also take a look at emails, etc. And it's really a new concept. It's a little scary, I think. I think you definitely should check with your legal counsel as to how far you can go within your organization. But in most cases, everything that I've been asking for as part of internal audits that we've been doing, it hasn't been an issue. But with that said, yeah, no, over back to you, Peter, and looking forward to today's presentation.
Great, thanks, Rich. Just before Rich gets started on what promises to be a very information-packed and enlightening analysis of the topic of today's webinar on detecting and preventing fraud, and in particular, detecting the organizations and employees' fraud quotient, which is kind of a unique concept for presentations of this kind, and we look forward to it. But in advance of that, let me just inform you quickly that this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to that recording within about 5 to 7 business days, along with a follow-up email to this webinar. For those of you, which I suspect includes the majority joining us today, who are seeking CPE credits, we will be putting up polling questions in compliance with NASBA regulations. There'll be about a half a dozen of those scattered throughout Rich's presentation. We'll put those up on the screen and ask you to choose the best answer and then share the results of the group as a whole. We encourage you and invite you to submit questions in relation to what Rich is presenting today. The lower right-hand corner will show you a little box for questions, and all you need to do is type that question into the box, hit enter on your keyboard, and we will then receive those questions and field them as they arrive. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a short, I promise you short, survey on how we've done and how the webinar was received by you, and we would value that feedback for our effort to continually improve the value of these presentations in the future. I believe that concludes the important aspects of the housekeeping matters, and with that, then I'm going to take this opportunity to send the floor back over to Rich, who will begin his presentation. Rich?
Great, and thanks, Peter, and thanks again, everybody. Just looking at the agenda, my hope was to start out simple and just start thinking about the ACFE study, taking a look at the different types of frauds that are out there, and some of the I guess taking a look at really some of the research out there on how the employee information fits into that. But I want to then just start looking mostly at structured data, general ledger, AP data, anything that someone is entering in a business transaction system, because I think that's really fair game, and it's a lot easier to grab. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about some of the big data type stuff where you could look at people's emails, let's say, or Word documents or Excel documents. But again, I think there's a point where you need to check with general counsel on what you can do. But with that, they have other big data sources that you could go to are, the CIA World Leader List. I doubt you have a world leader working at your company, but I figure it doesn't hurt to throw it through that analysis. OFAC data and others, in which we'll talk about. But I think the fraud quotient, the employee quotient, is really kind of the scoring of all of these different types of activities. So it's taking, be it general ledger analytics and AP analytics, etc., and looking at that and saying, what's odd about the activity of this person, and hence why don't we take a further look at it. So I hope to kind of start out a little bit general with a few of the slides, and we'll go to a polling question, and then I dive immediately into Excel, and we'll kind of just start going through the analysis. So with that, the building the employee data mart, or the employee quotient data mart, I think a lot of it ties back to this fraud matrix and hierarchy that's been set out there by the ACFE, and you can get this. I have this as the 2012 study in the picture, but there's a 2014 study we're going to show today. It hasn't changed, the matrix, and I think you need to look at each one of these fraud types and think about which ones are the most critical, risky for our organization. What should we be most focused on? Keep in mind that asset misappropriation is where it tends to be. And I think the issue with asset misappropriation is that it can be a bit small, so people will not register as much and not feel like it's as material, but yet it can have a material effect over time. A lot of the asset misappropriation cases that happen for years before somebody usually leaves the company, and then they find out after the person leaves, if they ever do. But financial statement fraud, corruption can be a lot greater, but also probably it's a lot. There's a lot less people that can get into that situation. So we're kind of looking more, I have to say, probably more at the asset misappropriation side when we talk about fraud, because it's the most prominent, but B, I think it tends to be something that employees, generally speaking, will do a lot more. Keep in mind, someone who's generally stealing from the company is doing other stuff too. So there is a good chance that the stealing part is just the tip of the iceberg, and there may be corruption, financial statement fraud, etc. So it is to say in a way, from a tipping point of view, a lot of times a police officer will pull you over because of something hanging in your windshield or what have you, but it really isn't that. It's because of probably the way you look that day and the type of car you're driving and how fast you're going and if you were swerving, and all these things kind of add up to the employee fraud quotient, and why a police officer would then pull you over, at which time they, may kind of do more research and analysis. So I think that's kind of what we're doing here. I mean, in a lot of ways, we're looking at it from that point of view. So, I mean, ultimately, what I'm trying to do here, and this is like my, grand vision, is to build a bit of a data mart that has a lot of data, a lot of different disparate data in there that we are summarizing and analyzing by employee, and then, feeding back some of it to the actual company to take a look at, because you have to trust somebody there to be able to walk through the transactions and research. But this is something that you need to do. And then recovery auditors or external auditors or assistants, like whatever you want to call it, uh, they can also help provide a lot of feedback. And I think, the key here with the employee quotient too, and we'll talk about this in the scoring side, it's something that never really stops changing. I mean, it's something that every year you should be updating it and thinking about how a new scheme can happen, or maybe because, just because people know what some of the schema are from the past, we may want to run some new tests to kind of fool them and play surprise. And that, that's part of just general auditing. But with that said, the goal here is to kind of create this data mart, put as much data as you can together, score it, and then have people look at it so that you can get feedback. But before we kind of continue, let me just quickly go to this ACFE study. And the certified fraud examiners report to the nations in 2014. You can download this from the ACFE website. It's very prominent. And, again, they have a section, I believe it starts on page 40, where you can go through and take a look at a lot of different statistics around employees. And, for that matter, are they an employee? Are they a manager? Are they owner, executive? You can kind of see the level of median fraud depending on who they are. Number of perpetrators involved, obviously, is something else. You might want to start looking at how people are coming together and colluding, and the types of schemes, the age of the person. You may want to consider, that, for the most part, it looks pretty spread, but it does seem to kind of average out in that sort of mid-40 range, that people tend to do something. And the gender of the person, obviously, is plays something into it, but I'm not sure it's that much different, and etc. But I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just thought, a lot of these statistics could be part of the scoring. You really could say, hey, have they been here 6 to 10, more than 10 years? Because, maybe just looking at this chart, you could say, well, you get a 1 if you're here, a 2 if you're there, a 3, and a 4 if you're here. And it's more of a scoring of heightening the score depending on where there generally has been more fraud in the past. Education level, etc. I mean, there's so many of these things, so you could probably you could have a lot of fun kind of building a scoring just on that alone, and then kind of go from there. But let me get back to my slide deck, and just give me a second here. I need a bear with me. Okay, so in looking at data and thinking about what are we really trying to do here with each of the data sets, be it accounts payable or travel and entertainment or general ledger. It's a lot of it tends to be just looking at trends and trying to see where there's a trend by person, by title, maybe the account numbers they're posting to, or etc. And by time. I mean, there's all these different types of trending that you can easily do. Here's a bunch of ideas right here, and I think you could argue, is that sort of the end goal here? Is really just to trend the data and kind of look at it, like have the auditor blink at the data and say, this looks weird, that looks weird. It could be that. It also could be, in addition to this, I think just looking for deviations. And I think, when we're looking at trends, because we have a limited amount of time to do anything these days, the unexpected trends or spikes is where you need to look. So as opposed to just noticing that the trend is, pretty standard, which may in itself be a fraud, you also, usually I think people are looking at those trends and spikes. The specific queries would also be kind of deviations that I throw into this. So it's not so much a trending spike, but also just more of a weird item, such as a vendor and bank account number matching, or a customer and bank account matching, or an address of a customer and an employee matching. And it's just, all of these different tests could, on one hand, be totally normal, on the other hand, could be fraud. Because, and as we'll end on this topic of scoring, because there's just so many reports that you can run, it's very difficult to know which one, exactly. So you tend to kind of run them all and do a bit of a health check. And so that these reports would be part of that health check. From a sampling technique point of view, there's random, there's statistical, there's stratified. We're going to talk about stratified sampling because I think that has, the most, or, the easiest way to kind of calculate and make sense to everybody. But I think we should also look at transactional scoring. But before we go forward, I just want to, kind of show you a small data example. Just bear with me 1 minute here. I think I just need to bring this up. Now, this could be a way to profile employees. I went into Google Images and I just typed Richard Lanza, my name, and I put it in quotes because I really wanted to get, the full me. And I'm right here. I'm the guy with the red shirt and the beard and all that. So that's me. And you look at everyone else, and what I find interesting, and it's just it's something of just a lot of these people probably somewhere down the line are related to me, but this fellow looks a lot like my father, and he looks a few years older than me. This is on the right top side. You could argue the guy on the left top left side as well could definitely be me in a few years. This fellow in the middle, and he's got a hat over here. He's a yoga instructor. All of these fellows are named Richard Lanza. And again, if I kind of shaved my head and shaved my beard, I'm not really far off of these people. So my point of bringing this up is that it trends really well. And I think a lot of times as auditors, we can easily look at this data and see the trends. We've had a few seconds here to look at this, and I hope you've probably found some of the deviations as well, things that just don't make sense. And I don't know how far off they are, but those 4 people are not named Richard Lanza. I think it might be Peter Lanza or some other name. They're related to a Richard Lanza, but it is something where the auditor can usually quickly see that and see how these people on the right are women and people on the left they look maybe English or European, but they don't really look like Rich, me at least. But think about it, from the perspective of, from a social media point of view, but just in general terms. If you didn't know what someone looked like, you could go out to Google Images, kind of put this in. More than likely, you're going to find them. They're going to be on some Facebook page or what have you that you'll find them. But I think it's also just generally speaking, I think people just kind of look alike, that are named the same. It's just, kind of a genealogy thing, I think, ultimately. As proven by, again, that simple test. Okay, bear with me 1 second here. So in kind of moving to a model, and what can we, do from here? I use this model quite a bit, and it's always served me really well. And that is, if you really want to look at a situation, you need to kind of look at the who, what, when, where, and why of that situation. We're going to go through this in detail. And obviously, the who seems to be something we would really focus on today because it's in employee profiling. But it doesn't have to be. You can definitely focus on these, the very strange time frames of activity, not even worrying about who it is, and then kind of summarize on the who and see who is in there. But first, you kind of want to look at, just what's strange activity from a what or a when perspective. Now, this model, not only looks at the trends, which is more the data mining, which is to that right-hand side, the trending, the spiking, but it's also kind of pulling queries, like specific queries that would, again, the employee to vendor bank account kind of check. There's a lot of direct control circumvention testing. But again, I wanted to put it all together in this model for you so you could see that the testing that we're going to do is going to follow this kind of who, what, when, where, and why, and that will trend and also kind of look for specific reports. And in looking at this, we're going to very quickly kind of get into some data files, but I wanted to first just kind of talk about, some of the who and the what tests. And, the who tests are obviously just, are they authorized users? Have they been terminated? Let's take a look at the trending of who that person is over time. Maybe take a look at the employee scoring of that person over time, which we'll do at the end, which is based on all these different reports. reports. And I tend to do that the most. I mean, I will tell you, at the end of the day, I'm sorry for these weird analogies, but, if we were kind of picking a team of basketball players, let's say, I would take a look at the statistics of those basketball players, for the past year, and I would score them and rebounds and, free throws and all these different things, and get to this final analysis that said, those 5 are statistically the best. And, maybe you pick a few others because you just have a sense that, they're not showing right numbers, but I think in the right situation, they're going to be good. Again, just keep going with this analogy with Tom Brady, probably one of the best quarterbacks ever, something where I think he was like a 4th or a 5th string pick, but I think it was Bill Belichick or whoever, was coaching the team at the time, kind of realized in this final game, in the final, a big game that they had, he came back and had some sort of 3 touchdown, masterpiece of a game. And he said, I don't care what his stats are. I want that guy, and it was something where, of course, he became the Tom Brady we all know today. But that's something where I think the auditor still needs to kind of look at these reports. I mean, I think there's a lot of scoring and analysis here that we can do, but I also think you kind of have to look at it and say, in addition to that, I have a funny feeling about this person just based on the way they've talked to me, the way they look down, all the body language kind of stuff that they may have thrown at you, which again could be part of the scoring that you're doing. From a what test point of view, so let's get off the who for a second of just kind of summarizing things by who. Let's kind of look at from what, and we'll do some examples of this in a second, where you might want to just summarize on the numbers being used, and then let's say $500 is being used over and over and over again, and it seems to be being used by this guy named Rich Lanza at the company. Maybe that's something to take a look at. Also, taking a look from a stratification point of view, and that's what we're going to do as an example, and really trying to stratify the data and saying over time, everybody's pretty normal, but then they have this huge spike for this one person in this one category of amount strata. So let's go take a look at that. So this gives you an idea of some of the who's and what's. If you wouldn't mind, Peter, if you could flip over the first polling question. This is our time for NASBA compliance and just kind of making sure that everybody is here today. And thank you for doing that. So sure, what is an example of a what question in the general ledger analytic tests? Is it extract unauthorized user entries, identify weekend journal entries, summarize entry by account type, or summarize by who entered the entry? So as you're filling that out, I will kind of leave it to you, Peter, to let me know as that's being filled out, yep. Percentages and
Not
such.
A problem.
Yeah,
We've
thanks.
Got, half of our attendees having cast their vote already. We're now at 3/4, so we'll keep the poll open for another 30 or 45 seconds or so to give everyone a chance. The results are kind of disparate, which is interesting.
And I was going to say, too, are there any questions that have come in? This is a good time, everybody, if you wanted to post a question, or really just post the question as you go. And what we can do is at the polling question times, we'll obviously have some time to deal with that.
Yeah, as I just checked the question box, Rich, and it's empty at this point, but I'll let you know. So we are just about close to 100% having voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and share the results, which show that 50% of our attendees chose summarize entry for account type, 32% said identify weekend journal entries, and then 9% each for extract authorized user entries and summarize by who entered the entry. Interesting.
Yeah, and I definitely, a little bit of a trick question in that
right.
We talked about when, and that would be the weekend journal entry, but I didn't put that in the slide yet. So, but weekends being kind of more of a timing or when question. The others are what. The others are who, except for that summarized by account type.
Good. Well, thank you for your responses to that question. I'm going to close that for you, Rich, and let you get back to your slide deck. There you go.
Great, and we're back. Yeah, thanks again. That seemed to work really well. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about a few examples, and we're going to dive into Excel. I just wanted to kind of explain these slides to you quickly, and then we'll dive into Excel. Essentially we have a stratification, and I'm doing it here with these nasty if statements, which I explained how to do this a long time ago like this, so I kind of still keep it going as like, well, you could do it this way. But this is a much better way, and this is utilizing something called VLOOKUP. But the key thing here is that we're using this true statement over here, and that's kind of the differential. A lot of times, as we'll talk about in VLOOKUP, you'll do more of a false. You put false there, not true. The true makes it more of a fuzzy match, and what it ends up doing, if you could kind of see, sort of what's happening here, it's actually looking at these values on the left-hand side and kind of putting a name of that a value over in the Strata version 2 column, depending on what's in there. So we'll go into Excel and show that, but I wanted to kind of quickly note that. And then last but not least, the key here is you can stratify, like a lot of people have seen stratifications. It's a stratification by amount. You kind of have, let me just go back here, you have kind of the 0 or, up to 100, over 100 to 1,000, whatever, and it's this one report, and that's interesting. What I like to do is to do it over time, to do it by department, to do it by person, of course, the employee, the person entering it. I might even say the salesperson associated with it if it's a sale, kind of thing. All of these different things can play out. And again, I know we're working on employees today, but I still think even doing things by vendor and customer is good, because if you do find some kind of odd vendors and customers, then you go, well, who's associated with them, and from an internal perspective. So, some of this is kind of a second jump, some is right on. But let me kind of dive into Excel now, because that's where we'll spend a bit of time, and I'm just going to kind of make this a lot bigger for you. So, trying to, in the interest of time, I have a data file here, which is an accounts payable data file. It could be any data file, T&E or general ledger or whatever. And what I've done over on the right-hand side is I've created the Strata version 2. As I said, Strata version 1, let's not do it. Strata version 2, way better. And there's a few ways to kind of set these up. I had kind of some extra stuff down here that we won't play with today, but right up here is this range, and essentially what it will do is kind of go everything up, essentially kind of starting from that range and downward, and that's why I put this negative 500 million or something, just to be a range that generally speaking the VLOOKUP will look to. So this point, this 1 penny will kind of work up until you get to $100, and then that'll work until you get to $1,000, and that's kind of happening in this slide here. So let's take a look at the VLOOKUP. I almost want to kind of create another one, so I'm just going to create a whole nother sort of table here, and I'm going to go I'm going to go equal VLOOKUP. And this is what I like to do. I like to go over to the FX button, which is right in the middle of the screen, and hit that FX. And of course it didn't come up, but we'll use VLOOKUP here. And what I like to do it this way, because it just it makes it a little easier. It actually explains everything down below, so if you don't know what stuff is. Okay, so we're going to look up an amount field. So let me kind of go over to the amount field, which is way over here. It's column B. And I'm going to go to a table array. So the table array is over here. And here's here's kind of the trick. I've already messed this up a little bit here, so yeah, just bear with me here. Sorry, folks. So let me kind of go back. Function VLOOKUP. I think I had it typed in there. We're just going to put B2. And then the table array, I'm going to highlight just that table array, but I'm going to hit the F4 button. So F4, I can't show that to you, but it's the F4 button. And what that does is it puts these dollar signs around everything. what that does is kind of set or fix the VLOOKUP. Then we're going to set a column index of 2, which means I'm going to pick the second column here. And last but not least, normally you would put in false here. And this is what like everyone does. They normally put in false. And the reason is false is an exact match. So if you're matching employee to vendor, you know, you want generally like an exact match of account number, not a fuzzy match, you know, kind of thing. But if you do true, it actually makes it a bit fuzzy, and in the stratification kind of way, it works. And I have to get, you know, note this, hopefully, well, bear with me one second here. The false didn't work, right? Because that wasn't, so this is a great test. The false made an NA, but now if I put a true, it ends up being over $1,000. And let me, you know, I'm just going to copy this down by double clicking on this little button on the right hand bottom corner. And it's a little, you know, I'll kind of freeze the pane here so that you can see this. But as we kind of, oh, no, that's not going to work. So if we go over to the right here, you will notice we have 2657 over 1,000. This one's up to 100. This is over 100, over 100, over 100. So we should have like 3 over 100 to 1,000 in a row, and you know it works. And now we have this kind of strata field. So now that we have the strata field, strata version 2, what I've done over on the right hand side is I've stratified things into a pivot table, and we'll show you how to make this, but I wanted to kind of show you the ending analysis first. So what I have is kind of the year and the months and the dollars that are showing up in each one of these. So this is a sum of the dollars, and if you look at a stratified chart of that, and this is a 3D chart, kind of, you know, very nice. Actually, oops, this is the one that we should be looking at. Give me one second. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This stratified chart here had the stratification and then the year and the month, and you can kind of see, you know, let me just head back here to this. We can kind of look in the stratification and see that the over, you know, $1,000 is really kind of throwing it out in that you have like a lot of activity there. But also notice you have some interesting credit activity. You know, 0 and under has some pretty interesting stuff. Now, one option, you know, is if you saw that and said, you know, let me go look at 374,000, you can double click on that and it'll bring up the transactions. So then you could go over here and say, you know, who entered this stuff? And it's entered by KD, you know, is sort of one option. So that, you know, that giving you some options of how to drill down into a pivot table. But let me go through in, you know, this one here. Just bear with me one second here. What we'll do is I'm just going to create a pivot table and kind of walk you through how to develop this. So I'm going to insert a pivot table. And we'll do this kind of slow this first time, and then I'll speed it up a little bit, is we're highlighting all of the data. Now, you may want to check you have all of your data. It's going down to 4822. Notice it's fixed with those dollar signs, and I'm going to throw it to a new workbook, or excuse me, new worksheet, which is something within a workbook. Then, you know, at this point, what I can do is I can bring over, for example, say the enter field. I can bring it into the rows section or over to the left. Now, I have to kind of note at this point, especially with pivot tables, that if you're running with Excel 2010 or 13, this will look pretty similar. If it's 2007 or 2003, it will be a little bit different, you know, depending. 2007, though, I believe had the ribbon, so I mean, at least you know you should have a lot of this stuff. But there are going to be some inconsistencies or small differences. I'm actually running with Excel 2003 today because I'm trying to show you Power Map, which is this very cool Power Map product that only is in Excel 2013. But anyway, that's just to give you a little bit of a history there, or some thoughts on that. I wanted to make sure that everyone understood, hey, you know, I'm not seeing the same button here. You should be able to find that button in your product. It's just a matter of, you know, looking for it in a certain place. Okay, so what I've done is I've actually moved the enter field to the columns from the rows, And in the invoice date field, I'm going to kind of drag that into the rows. I probably, if I do have an enter date, I almost like that one better. So we're going to do enter date. But this is where it gets a little tricky. I'm going to highlight this one item here. And I'm going to go to Pivot Table Tools. And I'm going to say group that selection. And I can do that by month and year. So we're actually, let's do quarter and year. It's a little bit smaller to take a look at. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the count of the enter, kind of within that field. And that should work well. And this kind of gives me that graph that we were just looking at before, which was sort of a quarterly user type of analysis that we had. So that's very cool. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take out the enter date now. So this is just kind of playing with these fields. I'm going to take that out, and I just have the years. And this is where I'll get a little tricky. I'm going to then bring in that Strata version 2. So I can bring it into the columns, but I'm going to bring it into the rows, and I think this might be the better way to do it. I always get a little confused on how best to do this, but we'll show you in a second how best to do it. What this is showing is by year in Strata. What I can do to change that is I can just take that Strata field on the right, that column, just drag it down below, and now you have the years on top and then the Strata down below. So this is another way. Once I've done this, and I'm showing you, a lot of techniques in one, but just trying to get you to that end analysis that we had, I can then click Pivot Chart, and I can click on this 3D sort of imagery of that. So that's over way to the right, the 3D column. So all I do is once I have a pivot table, I say Insert Pivot Chart, and voila, we have that pivot chart by person, by year, and can look at deviations. Now, I like looking at things in a 3D manner, and you can change the rotation by right-clicking and clicking on 3D rotation, and you can kind of change it that way, or you could get a bird's eye view. That's pretty good actually of what we're looking at here. And what you're tending to look for is in these time frames, where do things jump up? And you can kind of see for Kate, generally speaking, when we're looking kind of actually let me change that around. So now I'm going to drag the years down underneath, right? So that's a totally different graph. What's nice about this is, as I look at KD, I can now look at their 2010 versus 2011 activity. And I can say, 2010 was a lot higher, let's say, than 2011 in almost every one of these categories. And again, it's just interesting. It's something to maybe look into. And as we said, from a drill down capability, once you've done all this, you can just, double click on an item and drill down to those details and do further research. But I think the key here is you're first trying to look for the particular deviations. As we said, what are the trends, right? So we talked about trending, and then what are those deviations? And I think this is a prettier version of what we were kind of doing before, that is already kind of calculated and in your chart. But this would be something that definitely you could utilize as well. This is utilizing stratifications, pivot tables, and then pivot charting. So we're doing quite a bit in a kind of a small amount of time. But I also wanted to kind of move it along for people that have seen pivot tables before, and it's not as kind of alarming or different for them to go through that. But just to kind of conclude of just a few other tests that are in this data that you might want to just take a quick look at. What we'll get to this one in a second. What I wanted to just say to you was a kind of an easy way of handling this is if you had a payables data file. So we'll just start with payables data. Let's just say we wanted to look for authorized users. We could insert a pivot table, again just like that, and we could bring over the enterer into the rows, and we could highlight that data now, because these are people. Now, notice how you have blank, so that's kind of interesting. So you may want to bring the enter into the values and say, we don't have anything there. That's good. So, okay, so we could take these users that are, per the thousands of transactions, we can copy that, and we could go over to a user access list where we could paste that. If I can get that, hold on one second. We'll just kind of paste that data here. Now, it's a little odd to do it this way, but one thing that you could do is, if you had a much longer list, this is the user access list, and then down below here is the actual, entry people. And once again, power of pivot tables, just trying to show you, multiple times here. So this is wrong, what it's done here. So you want to highlight, the entire data set instead of it highlighting just a couple of things. And I'm just going to do it to this worksheet. I'm going to put it right over here, just to have a pivot table. Whoops. I'm not exactly sure what it's having trouble with, so let me just take a look at that. Bear with me. Let me just do it to a new worksheet just for the interest of time. Okay, here is my problem, and I apologize. Right up here, I really should have put the word type. So if the pivot table doesn't have a field name, it doesn't know what to do with it. So that type field was not highlighted. So let me just pivot table one more time. Existing worksheet, put it over there. So why am I doing this? The reason for doing this is to kind of get a type into the columns and the user access list down here, and then we can get a count of the user access list. And you can kind of notice pretty quickly here that KD is not on the user list. So this is a real interesting way, or quick way, of just throwing two different data sets on top of one another, having a bit of a type field, and then having that tell you, that person's unauthorized, we need to go look at their transactions. So that's sort of an employee profiling pretty quickly right there. Okay, with that said, let me just make sure. Let me just go through. I'm just going to go through just a couple more slides, and then we'll kind of head back to the polling question. So just bear with me one second. And in the slides themselves, what we're going to talk about, we talked a little bit about the date grouping, but we're going to do a little bit more of the where type grouping, and kind of conclude on the where, when, why, and then at that point we're going to after that we're going to start taking a look at visualizing more, as well as doing more textual analytic type analytics, and then scoring. So a lot to get to here, but just kind of at a high level here, there's a where, when, and why. And the where is obviously, where are these people? The when is something of obviously, over what time frame. And I really feel that stratification tends to find things that people don't realize, because they don't realize people are looking at it in that stratified way. So you can quickly see somebody who, has 12 transactions a month that is showing up in a certain category, a certain strata that really goes a lot higher in another time frame. So it's not only kind of summarizing things by day, which is very good, but it's also kind of looking at these other categories by the when. And then the why is kind of like, why are we looking at this? It's like a deviation. It's an exception report, like a round dollar amount being paid, that sort of thing. So it tends to be more I think of just kind of odd activity. And, just to kind of conclude on this, I read this article. I think it's like a $5 article. I couldn't, include it for free or anything, because I bought it off of Amazon. But it was like the only thing I really could find on this, where it talks about getting inside the mind of a computer hacker insider, somebody who's in the company. And, it kind of talks about all of the other indicators of risk. And, I thought of like the why, when we think about why, look at this person, I do, we talked about some of the statistics and, just kind of things from the ACFE study. But I think is some thought to, looking at a department and saying, they're very frustrated because they've just gone through, say, a conversion to a new software, and they've been working, till 3 in the morning for the last 6 months, and there's a lot of frustration, a lot of but I think this article is pretty interesting because it's one of the only ones I could find that really kind of talks about profiling employees and based on their kind of more like on their psychological profile, I suppose, as to whether or not they may hack or steal from the company. So again, I this may be something to talk to the HR department about and see what you can do here. But I think there are some general perceptions that the auditor or reviewer can put into the analysis. Okay, with all that said, I think we should get on to our next polling question. So I did want to throw that out there. If you don't mind putting that up there, Peter.
Just bear with me 1 second. I will get that up for you.
And I can keep going a little bit too if we're having trouble.
Here, hold on. Here we go. And it reads, what is an example of a what question?
I think, Peter, we just need the next polling question. I'm sorry. That's the first one. Unless I may have given it to you twice. I'm just bringing it up myself. I think it's more in order for the stratification to work. What is the last setting?
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Here we go.
So in order for the stratification of value to work, what is the last setting of the VLOOKUP? Is it false, maybe, true, or yes? And actually, yeah, I don't know. Thanks a lot, Peter. I'm sorry. I kind of got some of the polling information coming up, but if everyone wouldn't mind completing that, I think I could actually track that polling question. It looks like 92% of you have voted, so thank you for that.
Right. 92 have.
And I'm just looking at the questions. Just bear with me 1 second. And I know there may be some links or things that are right. So I noticed a lot of questions are just kind of on the data files and the presentation file. So far, I think it should have been sent out prior. I don't know, Peter, but it sounds like from the email here, you should have received an email with a link to the slides and I think
Correct.
the data files. But if not, you will get the data files after the presentation. If not.
Correct. That all of those files should have been sent out by email.
I think what tends to happen is we may have just a bad email address here or there, or I've noticed even some spam kind of bouncing in our time here. So
Exactly. Yeah, it's a possibility. But if that's the case after the presentation, anyone who does not have and who wishes to have the slide deck as well as the data files that Rich referred to, please contact me, and I will get them to you.
Well, I know 92 or so % of you voted. I think probably it's a good time to close the poll and share that with everybody. And true is the right answer. Is either kind of true or false, and were the right answers, but true is the actual right answer for the stratification. So thank you for that. I'm going to hide that, and we'll kind of hope that my screen comes back here, so we'll see. Yep, perfect. So what I wanted to move on to now is kind of the where point of view. And in the where point of view, let me just, okay, so we're all set here. Whoops, geomapping. So there's this product out there called Batch Geo, and there are other products which we'll talk about, but that one tends to be one that a lot of people know and seems to be pretty well respected, but it tends to also be about $100 a month to have access to it. So I guess you could just run it for a month and stop, and the next time you have an audit, do it again. But it just seemed a bit expensive. And Power Map for Excel 2013 is something that you can just install and utilize. And I know a lot of people probably don't have 13. Like we've looked at I've done some studies on this, like polling, and for the most part, maybe about 20% of people are on, Excel 2013. But as these features kind of keep coming, and if you're on an older version of Excel, it really makes a lot of sense if we're doing this in Excel to upgrade to 2013. But again, all the techniques that I'm talking about today can be done in IDEA, ACL, Arbutus, all of these other products that I'm sure or have heard of. So I did want to mention that as well. But with that said, we use Excel because it's pervasive of everybody, so it's great. Okay, so continuing on here. BatchGeo, it's batchgeo.com. You'll get a screen looking like this. I'm not going to do it right now, but you get a screen looking like this, and you can highlight, variety of kind of fields, address, city, state, postcode, and then based upon that, you will get a really nice set of graphs. And it actually uses Google Maps, and it does, I feel, a very, very nice job. But again, the $99 price kind of gets me a bit. So what is also out there is this Excel 2013 Power Map. And even though they say preview, it's something that is in the product now. And it does a really nice job. And I actually say it's even better than BatchGeo in the way of graphing, as we'll show you in a second. And I'll just kind of keep going here. I have another just slide here. Bill Jelen kind of told me about this, and I have that YouTube kind of link down below there. I think it's like a quick link to get there. But what he even was able to do in this video that you could watch is track his plane flights and kind of track like the altitude as well as the distance over time, and you could kind of do this time analysis. So if you ever had any sort of time analysis of logistics or anything like that, you could use Power Map to kind of track all that for you, which is pretty neat. But with that, I wanted to kind of dive into the Power Map product and just start showing that to you. But last but not least, let me just show you Microsoft Map Point. This was the product prior, to this Power Map that you normally would spend like $300 for, and I've used this for years. And what I was able to do, and I wanted to, we're going to kind of talk about this in more detail, but this was a pretty good example of the chart. Take a look at the left-hand side. Again, a stratification, something that I keep talking about. What I was doing was looking in actual neighborhoods where you had different, like really different setups. Like you had someone that had a very high salary, and then someone who had a lower salary. And what I was looking for is that you had a trend of a lot of low salaries in a given area, and then you'd have like one person that was just massive. Now, you can do this by zip code, you can do this a lot of different ways, but it is a way of profiling some sort of payroll fraud or just something that just looks off. It may even be like a phony employee that is getting a lot of money kind of sent to that address, but yet there's no one there. Again, a lot of payroll, though, has moved in the way of electronic payroll, so it is a little harder to kind of do this type of address analysis. But, I wanted to kind of show that to you at a high level. So getting into the actual data, and again, I've kind of built in some of this stuff for you already, but let us, just trying to think here, just bear with me 1 second here. What I was able to do, and I need to, bear with me 1 second here. So what I've done is kind of inserted a power map, but I think I just need to kind of check here. Yeah, good. I basically had taken the data off of batchgeo.com, where all they did was they took the Apple stores, like Apple iPad kind of stores. They took a few of them, and they put them into a table. And I guess I was looking. I'm just gonna, as I'm jumping around here, I should have an employee to vendor table in here, or Excel spreadsheet in here somewhere that this is based off of, but I may have hit it. So just no, yeah. So I'll take a look for that. Oh, here it is. I think it's called map data, and then we had map data 2. So in map data, what I've done is I've even highlighted kind of a vendor and an employee over on the left-hand side. So if you could kind of see that, we have the vendor and employee, but all this is just really addresses of Apple stores. And I think I'm pretty sure I put one in here that is actually a duplicate. So this one here, at least, and probably a couple of them are duplicates here. Okay, so with that, what you do is you go to the power map function. Now that you kind of go insert power map, and what it does is it looks at this data, and it says over in this bottom section here, it's very similar to like pivot tables. It says, where do you want to graph stuff? So, I mean, I almost don't want to mess it up, but what you will do is go through and kind of select, what's the city? Well, there's the city. What's the state? Zip. Now, you could only do this by zip code too, if you wanted to do it by zip code, but I kind of like doing it in this more holistic, down to the street address perspective. Now, I said before that there were 3 employee and vendors, right, that are showing up on the same address line, and sure enough, you can kind of see that employee vendor. But how did I get there? And what I did was to kind of type that. I had to go to the next section, and I said the range is this type, so that ends up becoming the type. If you want to get a little crazy, if you had some amounts in here, we're going to show this in a second, you could drag the amounts into the height, and then that would make the height of the line greater, depending on how much in money, is being paid out in that particular case. So pretty neat, in itself. Now, what you can then do is you could click on map labels, and that automatically gives you, if you could see this, all of the different types of names with regards to, as we scroll into, let's say, White Plains, New York, where I tended to, I actually kind of grew up very close to here, on Boston Post Road, that you can get down to this level. But then at this point, you have an ability to kind of change your themes, so that you could go to more of a street level satellite theme. Now I can get right down there and say, hey, what mall is this at? It's probably the Galleria Mall in White Plains or something. And within there, you can actually see what's happening. Now, let's say you're sending millions of dollars to an apartment building. That might be odd. I mean, unless you're renting the apartment building or something, it's kind of odd. So here is like another view of the data. You can actually add scenes to this by I can kind of go here and say add scene, and then it will kind of create a scene down here, and I'm able to kind of change the theme of that scene and do all this, nifty kind of, colorization and whatnot. But I'm not going to go that far. I mean, I personally, for me, just having the satellite image, which was one of these themes in here, I think it was this one here, Arial Color. This is still, to me, the best one, because it gives me like a really good picture. When you're all done with this, you could create a video by literally clicking the create video, and it walks through kind of each scene. And I want to show that to you because I really think it's an impressive item, and I'm pretty sure I put this in the data files to you. It's called employee. I'll show it to you here. These are the data files, not this one here, but that was the employee report to the nation. But these down below here are the data files, and the employee to vendor tour 1 is this, and hopefully you can see this. I'll try to blow it up here. You can kind of see how it's growing, and then we're like flying into the scene, and then the map labels change, and and really I didn't do exactly what I showed you today, but this gives you an idea of the type of video that you could create. And I mean, it really makes an impressive audit finding report, to have this thing kind of, scrolling in and then saying, here is the fraudulent vendor working at this particular location, within the company. So, I still think, that's a really useful tool. This is Power Map. And I'm probably just going to come off of this one. Let me just close that and just see. I did create another Power Map, and I'm just kind of showing you how do I get to these. You can go to the map section, go launch Power Map, and I go to like Tor 2. And what I did in Tor 2, instead of mapping it just based on the location, I used the type in this one, which, I'm sorry, let me just show you this. In this one, I actually had an amount in here. So instead of the type being vendor or employee, I had a dollar amount in there. And now that dollar amount, when you graph it, it can become a larger line, in your item. And there are these other options, but I really don't like them. I'm just like showing you could do this like heat map. And, from a scrolling in point of view, you have an ability to kind of go high level like that. And then you could kind of scroll in and, scroll into a particular section of that data. But, it really did look like a lot's happening here. I'm going to switch back to this, chart and scroll out a little bit. And again, you could see how you could have a bit of fun doing this. But it does allow you to kind of look at a lot of data pretty quickly and again, with various different themes and analysis to boot. Okay, so that is the payable sample pivots. Hopefully everyone is still seeing that. I had a couple of people saying they're not, one person saying they're not seeing the screen, but I have an audience view that seems to be okay per here. So, okay, we'll continue on here. Let me go back to the actual data file. Now we've done kind of the where section, and now what I want to do is take a look more at kind of just visualizing trends in the data. So we talked a little bit about this, but let me just head back to one of the pivot table charts that we had. We'll take kind of this date quarter chart. This is something we created, and this is kind of by the enterer, which is in the rows section, and then we have kind of the quarter and year up here. Now I'm going to play around with this one a lot, and kind of take out the quarter and the year, and I'm going to bring in the enter date, into this section. The enter date will, just be a field that's at a row level, and what I can do based on pivot table tools is one option, group selection, or I can right click that and say group. And by grouping that, I can go to say month and year, and it does this month and year thing. I can also right click it and say ungroup, and then that brings me back to this daily kind of chart. Now, I find it interesting that some of the largest findings that I've ever had was more of a daily chart that was performed. So the trending aspect of things can be really powerful, and I think I have a kind of a chart of this somewhere. And this, so what I did over here, I have kind of just the enter date in a row, and I have a summarization of that amount down below that. And then here we have the actual, total amount by enter date. And you can really see some of the spikes, kicking out at key points, be it, a negative 350,000 here or a positive, whatever, 200,000 there. These spikes happen. And one of the largest frauds I've ever found at a company was based on this graph and just, looking at general ledger data and saying, oops, that day looks really bad. And what happened was it wasn't, it's very similar to what you're seeing on the board here today. It was like they had a lot of pluses and then they had a lot of big minuses. And when you added it together, it just didn't make sense, so we looked into that. Some of the other large frauds we found, are just through trending by title of person who has the travel and entertainment, trending on the size of the amount, just like we talked about before, as opposed to these really complex reports, that I think, some of you have probably seen before. I think some of the really basic ones like this are useful. And again, the daily summary is just a great example of something that you can do very quickly. Now, if you do have, Excel 2010, 2013, one of the things you get is for any time that you're in a pivot table. So I go back to the pivot table here for a second. You get the pivot table tools, and that allows you kind of every possible option here. One of the options is pivot chart, which we talked about before and did an example, but that is kind of this automatic chart, that it'll create. And you have lots of options. I mean, you could, I guess, go to a pie even and a pie chart and put that here and realize that, that day, December 8th, 2010, and, this day. I mean, a lot of people don't like pie charts. I could see why, but that one wasn't too bad. I mean, you actually could see some of the large deviations in time. Okay, so I think, with this, I wanted to note when you're in kind of this chart mode, instead of having the pivot table tools, which again gives you everything for pivot, now you get pivot chart tools, and now you have this ability to say, I don't want a chart title, I don't want a legend. I don't know. I mean, you can kind of, just add things at will, if you will. You could add error bars. I don't know why. But maybe a trend line. Trend line might be nice too. And just, it's very simple to kind of add things. But I guess from a pivot chart point of view, you have really every option of changing the data source of, from a design point of view. If you click on design, you then can add a chart element. You can change the data. You can change the chart type. Like we could go back and I can't make it 3D, but I can make it a pie chart, and now I have this, kind of nice, crazy looking pie chart. But all of these things are kind of possible through pivot chart tools and the pivot charting. So let me just kind of head back to slides here for a second. We, kind of gone through a few of these slides. We have talked about VLOOKUP, and we'll do an example in a second here with more specific items. But I just wanted to kind of show you, the graphing side, kind of where to go for pivot charting, how to group date ranges. This was that 3D rotation of the enter and month. There's like a lot of different examples that I showed you today of this, but this is one of them that is in there. And I wanted to, kind of stop on this last one and note that you can make a really nice dashboard of the results, and just kind of getting to how to do that. Going back to this item here, there's no reason why you can't kind of right-click here and say Move Chart. And I'm going to say, I'm going to make it an object in this sheet over here, somewhere over here, right? So we'll kind of make that an object there. There's no reason why you can't kind of go around to the various other charts that are out there, just kind of right-click, move chart, and we'll go, object in sheet 4. And and so on and so forth. I mean, you literally can create a dashboard. So what can be done in Excel, and I wanted to note this, is that these charts that you have, these graphs that you have, they seem very inflexible and something you can't use, but they're very flexible. I mean, something where you can make a really nice dashboard of it. And then if you know what you're doing a little bit here, when you put your data into the pivot into the payables data, and you use the same columns and everything, then you should get the same set of pivot tables, kicking out, and hence the same dashboard. It's just now updated with new data. So, I wanted to note, to kind of conclude, I think in a lot of ways there's so many reports, and I've talked about scoring, which we'll conclude on, but I also think having a dashboard of reports like this, a visualization, is just a great way of kind of getting a perspective of employees, but like multi-perspective in one shot. And this would be, very similar to kind of looking at a chart like this. and let's imagine everything here is around enterers, you could very kind of quickly pick out the deviations and then kind of summarize that up and say, let's go call these people up. So all right. With that said, I think I think I can actually post my own polling question. I'm just let me do that, and that is, just bear with me 1 second. Sorry. What pivot table function is used to calculate a chart from a pivot table? And while that's going, if there are any questions as we're going along here, please let me know. Happy to show you that. Continue into that. And I think in a lot of ways this concludes a discussion about kind of trending and reporting. We'll talk about a few of the specific reports that you could run, but I think what we're going to do now is more textual analytics to conclude on, which is more of like an unstructured data look. And then we're going to take a look at watch lists, and then we're going to take a look at scoring. So the watch lists, they're relevant, definitely, but I think they're a little less relevant. I think a lot of time the watch list is more for customers and vendors, from a terrorist organization point of view. But again, I think there are a lot of things that you could take a look at. So 92% of you have voted. I will leave the poll out there just for another 30 seconds or so. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in. We do appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to close that poll in just like 2 seconds here. All right, I'll close that poll. And just to see, the pivot chart function was correct. That was the one function that was correct. And the other ones like pivot data was I don't think it was actually an item. Group data and line chart was not really picked as well, but pivot chart does create that image. So let me hide that poll. Cool. So again, this is the dashboard of charts. I wanted to just go back to a couple of slides I skipped over kind of in the right timing. Excuse me, is in taking a look at kind of why take a look at things. These are some of the reports that you might want to run, from a payroll perspective, as an example, just even matching the employee data from the human resource system to the payroll system. Just, are they an employee, is always like a really good test. And obviously there are others here. From a T&E point of view, I mean, I do feel like T&E, if a person is, I want to say prone to using T&E, or if they have a job that allows them to use T&E, this is a great way to kind of profile people, quite frankly. It's almost like, I mean, again, I don't want to speak in a derogatory way towards employees or anything like that in any way, but it is almost like a little bit of a science experiment. I mean, it's kind of like if you're looking at T&E and a person's putting down $25 a day as the per diem, let's just say, for other stuff, and they're just putting $25 a day, every day for the last 10 years, there's probably something going on there, or they have a very valid reason why they're charging the $25, and management understands and whatnot, and it's like totally understood. But it's things like that that are just, again, tips of icebergs that I think kind of highlight, to all to all criminals out there, I suppose, you almost don't want to show any sort of bad thing. So going back to the example of the police officer pulling over somebody, again, take the stuff off your windshield and off, just make sure that all your brake lights work, and your license plate light works, and all these kind of silly things that you could get pulled over for. So I think similarly, T&E is an area where I think a lot of these little, I almost want to say like little examples of things that could go wrong in a T&E reporting. They're great to look at, but I think they do highlight where an employee may kind of be going potentially over the line in other areas. Okay. We talked about the grouping and the graphing and all that, so I'll blow past that. And we'll talk now about red flag word searching and kind of word summaries. And I just kind of, somebody had mentioned this to me recently, and I thought it was a great point, that taking a look, if the MCI auditors had looked for corporate unallocated revenue accounts or line costs, for example, initially, they probably would have just stumbled upon so much inactivity that they wouldn't be able to understand or need to kind of get more follow-up on. And what I'm finding, similarly, is that utilizing the words that someone is writing and or just putting into a description field or what have you can have a very a very informative look. And people don't expect you to look there, I think, a lot of times, so they don't expect you to analyze like how many times the word adjust showed up in the data. Like that's a random weird thing to worry about. So the fact that we're tracking it, if the MCI auditors, again, were looking for the words line costs showing up in general ledger postings, they would have found a lot, but who knew to look? So red flag, again, and textual analytics and keyword searching has really kind of come out of the FCPA reviews, a Foreign Corrupt Practice Act. And that limits a lot of companies from doing this stuff, because I think people then go, well, we don't have foreign operations. We don't really work a lot in selling to government officials or anything like that. So I'm not really sure I need to so much worry about this, and they're probably right. But I still think that textual analytics is something that could be applied. But for those of you that do have foreign operations, and corruption is key in some of these countries, this is a great way to kind of search for it. And so we'll show you some examples here. Now, I guess the real simple way of doing it, right? Like back in the day when we were just getting started with this, what it started out is just to say, well, what are a list of bad words, and it sounds crazy, like the word fraud or bribe or whatever, and fraud shows up a lot in data, but it'd be something like credit card fraud charge. Now was credited back by the credit card company. So you have the word fraud showing up, even though you think it would never show up. And there are various others. And summaries can obviously be done by person and others, and we're going to show you lots of cool examples there. Now, there's kind of like a hard way of doing it and an easy way of doing it. So I'm going to show you both, but we'll talk through this. And before I jump into Excel, and I don't like to sell products, when we're talking and like I'm selling products, but John West, who programmed Active Data for Excel, made this product free, and it's called Text Analytics, and it's this free download, and we're going to show it to you today. And the fact that it's free, I just have to promote it. Not only is it free, but it really does stuff that I think you would pay a lot of money for in other products. I have a tough time finding what he's doing kind of very easily in Excel. And while I don't have all the time to spend on it today, at that link down below, you can watch a 10-minute video by John in how to do this, but I'm going to give you the quick version today. But again, so kind of with all this textual analytics stuff in mind, I'm going to head over to Excel, and just bear with me here. I'm not going to save that. I'm going to open up the right file so that we can get going here. And I should just attempt to get to the page here. Hold on one second. I think informationactive.com, and then it's text analytics. And what that will do is kind of bring you to this text analytics word summary page. You can download it, and you can kind of see here how it works, and we'll talk about that. And I really think he did a nice job even on this page of explaining each of the functions, where you can do various types of analysis. But what I found to be most impressive, and I have to say I asked him for a lot of these things, so I kind of said, hey John, can you build this, that, and the other thing? And he was able to do it pretty easily, or at least he made, it was done very quickly, is Outlook. And what he's able to do is to take a look at Outlook inbox files or sent files or what have you, and to be able to build kind of like a keyword analysis based on that, and it'll even bring up like the actual email item, etc. And the reason I'm showing this to you here is I'm not going to run this against my email today and have it take forever to run through this, but you can actually do a keyword search based on this type of, this tool, and you can go right into Outlook files and other files. So, okay, let me kind of show you how this works. And we by the way, we did have a file index for the data files. Hopefully you got them before. I know we tried to send out the link, but we do have this here. And in here we have these two files, keywords and first letter, year, word, sum, something or other. So let me just kind of go to that. So the keywords file is kind of the bad way of doing this. I mean, in my opinion, it's sort of the hardest way of doing it. And the way of doing it is basically to say, well, if I had a field, and let's say it's a journal entry description field, and it says to increase revenues, we'll just kind of keep it, I can't even spell quickly here, hold on. There we go. And what you would do is you could go to more of a text to column type of a analysis, and you can then say based on space, and that will kind of delimit the field. At that point you can hit finish, and it pulls those data fields into 3 different categories. And with that said, what you can then do, and we talked about this before a little bit with VLOOKUP, and I'm just going to show this to you now. If I go into the FX of this, so that if I just click on FX, we did that before, but it'll bring up the actual value. What it's doing is it's looking up C2, which is right here, and it's looking it up to that table array, which is over on the left-hand side. And then it's kind of figuring out if it's found. And if it is found, it then puts that word in here, which is really just this column 1. So that 1 is this column A right over here. And this is a false, so this is an exact match, like you have to exactly match. And notice the word increase, was one of the keywords, right, that's over here, and there it is. And then therefore, that will match, and you'll have a lookup of increase, and then plug, over here. So this is sort of the hard way of doing this, but this is definitely one way of doing it. Now, the other way of doing it is basically using this textual analytics tool, and it's something where, bear with me one second here. I'm going to actually close this one because I think this may be a little hard to work with, and bear with me just one second here. Just going to bring up our past Excel spreadsheet here, and I'm trying to find a field actually that maybe quite frankly even the strata field might be good for this. So we'll kind of highlight the strata field. When you go to active data, if you have active data, it puts it in this other section. I have active data, which is like an Excel add-in product. But if not, my understanding is it makes a tab for you called Text Analytics. So I'll click on Text Analytics. And so the Text Analytics has a variety of ways of kind of looking for things. Now, one way of doing it is to kind of highlight an entire folder and look for the word fraud. And maybe, in this particular case, what it's going to look through is PDF documents, Word documents, and text documents, as well as it can look through Outlook, but I'm like not going to do that, right now. So yeah, I mean, I think it would be kind of interesting for me to look for this word fraud, and I'm going to attempt it. Let's see how fast it works. I think what I'll do is I'll look through the PDF documents only, and I think there's only one of them. And, amazingly enough, it comes up really quickly, right, and is able to do this. Let me go include subfolders, and I'll scan again. And, hopefully you're seeing this, but it well enough, it's really quick. It went through the reports of the nations. It went through, these other reports. And it actually tells you, like the number of items where it identified that particular item. Now, my understanding is if I then double click on that, I'm pretty sure it even highlights in the PDF where the word fraud exists. I know it does it for text files and Word documents as well, so that it'll actually find things really, really quickly for you. So this is a great way, just to kind of point this thing at a hard drive, and it may take a little while, but it was really quick, and have it kind of search for keywords that you're looking for. So that's kind of step one. That's one thing that you could do. Let me just get rid of that. Now, the other, the other way of doing it is, to do something like query by match, and that would be another way of doing it using active data. And then you can also kind of do this word search to this phrase search. And I'm just going to open up Text Analytics one more time here. And but I will say this: John has a wonderful 10-minute video that walks through this a lot better than I can show you. But I did want to really get across the point that you can search through text documents, PDF documents, and such. So from a keyword searching point of view, it actually looks like the other thing that I'm pretty sure that you get with this. I'm just going to highlight this. If you then right-click on any of your data, again, I might have a little bit different of a look because I have active data, but if you don't have active data, you can highlight a column and you can just do a word summary. And this is another way of kind of doing your keyword analytics, in that just all I did was just to kind of show this to you, I highlighted this column here and I right-clicked and I just went to, word summary. And what it did was it highlighted all the data. It's a little hard to read. I'm going to put it to an Excel spreadsheet so you can kind of see the results here. And this is all part of, I believe, part of the textual analytics tool that you can download. It has everything in it. And what it did was it summarized by all the different types of numbers and words that were in there. And remember, this was just the stratification field. So it's like over, under, etc. And it gives you a frequency, tells you, how many times these kind of letters and words showed up, the frequency of them, the length of them, etc. But now that you have this, you can easily VLOOKUP to this column over here, and just like we were talking before in the VLOOKUP type analysis that we were doing, and you could just VLOOKUP these words. So what I would do just to be safe is I would kind of create like an upper of that, and then that would bring everything to like an uppercase, and then I would go get my list of keywords and then do like a VLOOKUP, of those two things together. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. In doing so, and again, I want to just urge you to take a look at this only because it's free and it really does a lot for you in that free capacity. John has a much better video, as I said, that really like step by step walks through it, and we just don't have the full time for that today. But I wanted to kind of show you this a couple of last sort of thoughts here, and then dive into another example using kind of these words. So one of the things that you can do is start to analyze, be it using that textual analytic tool from a second ago that we were talking about, or just your own work. You can get to a point where you have almost like fingerprint of the words being used in your data, and this what you're looking at here is actually a letter fingerprint of data, and we're going to show this in an example. So what I did was I summarized by the letter of the first word of that word, and then the time frame, and just kind of looking at how are things changing. And it's hard to see, in the slide, but you'll notice it's really consistent, across time. So let me get to that slide lastly, and let me kind of get to this other file. So we have this first letter, year, word, sum, key, play. It's this very long file name, but it was in our index of files that we had. And it's got some pretty interesting stuff going on. So I did not use the data that John West had in that textual analytic tool. I used a product called ACL to build this. But what I did was I figured out what word is it occurring in. So if I had a field, to increase revenues for, whatever, the word increase is in the second position. So, it's kind of like that second position word would be the word increase, and then that's how it's matching. What I basically did was I took a look at year over year. So you have the year here. I have the first letter of this word over here. And in order to get a first letter, it's very easy. You can just do a left function in Excel, comma 1, and that'll get you the first letter, of any kind of textual field. And then there's that word 1. So that's the actual word. And then you have the occurrences of that particular word. So what I did was I pivot tabled that over here, sorry. And, what I'm looking at here, it's a little hard to, it's a lot hard to look at. But this is every keyword being used. So, the word adjust, fraud, all these things. And it's being done over time. So you're able to kind of see the difference between 2013 and 14. And hopefully now that you understand pivot tables a little bit more, I won't go through this so much of building this stuff, but I wanted to show you this thing up here. It's called a slicer. And I know that you have them in 2010. They're a little bit harder to find, I believe, in the toolbar. That may not be right here, but 2013, it's right here. And what's really cool about this, and why I'm showing you this chart, it's a little small, I will admit, but let me just kind of go over here to the to this part here. What you're able to do with a slicer, what you would do is you would basically select the pivot table, and you would say insert slicer, and you can pick any one of these. I've kind of set this up already, so that I've picked them and kind of set it up, and you can start to look, let's say, at the first letter, or the letter A, the letter B, the letter O, for example, and look how the letter O has this very, it's not very used very much. This is, I don't know if I could put these in here, but it's kind of like year 1, year 2 for the letter O in the first word, second word, third word, fourth word, that kind of thing. And you notice there's this like huge deviation at the sixth word, 2014, starting with the letter O. And again, all of this data is available through this active data tool we have. But notice here you're going through this, you have like 4, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 59. You know what I mean? So in the sixth position of word, we had the word other showing up 58 times. And that never happened in 2013, but it's now happening in 2014. This is another way of kind of looking at that chart, as an example. So, I give you this to play with, and the way it kind of works. Sorry, I'm making my screen too small, or too big, so it's kind of bringing my slicers together. What you're able to do is to kind of, you could look at it at a high level and maybe look at it just by year. You could even look at like the first word, so if we just said, what's the first word? What are, from a keyword point of view, from the word adjust and fraud and all that, what is kind of the pattern that we're showing for 2013? What's the pattern we're showing for 2013 and 14? So now I got both of them in there. And just to kind of see, 2013, we had a lot more V than we have, anything else. And what's V, and then you can go into that word and double click on it and learn more. So again, I show this to you to say the reason I'm summarizing on the letter, a lot of people may say, why are you doing that? It's trying my best to kind of bring things down to a much smaller perspective, kind of like Benford's Law. A lot of people will say, what is Benford's Law? Benford's Law, if you have $123, the Benford Law first digit would be a 1 in that particular case. So that's kind of the Benford Law of it. And what I'm trying to do is, kind of do that, but here with letters instead of with numbers. So, so with that said, let me get into the next polling question, because we're definitely at that time. And it is, what was one of the phrases used in the MCI case? And it is either line management, cost recovery, key controls, or line costs. And some of the questions, I think we're just getting a couple of people losing video, but no questions yet. So if you do have some questions, do let me know. We'll keep this polling question open for a little bit. And keep in mind, we've provided you the data files. Some people may not have gotten it because the link, the email not have gotten through, but we've provided the data files so you could play with it. I do find that like this textual analytic thing, you almost want to kind of play around with some of those filters that we had. And again, all that was just looking at the keyword activity, but it really does allow you, once you figure out that you have some odd keywords like other, you can then go back into the data and realize, who is throwing off the word other the most, who's that person, and then you can score it accordingly.
By the way, for those of you who are having problems with the video, the reason for it is unclear. It's something that we can't control. However, you can probably remedy it by simply logging out and logging back in. It should take you about a minute and a half to do that, and then you should be hopefully working as intended.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that.
And just going to the poll, the correct answer is line costs. I think line management was very close, but line costs was one of the ones that is key. And it looks like some people have come back online, which is great to see. Keep in mind there should be a video when we're done, and I know some of the stuff I do might be slow, but some of it I know is pretty quick. So that if you do want to go back to that, we could always you'll have a video to kind of refer back to, which should help. So what I just want to make sure is you see my screen. Yep. Okay, great. So I wanted to talk about some of the external data sources, of which I can't really give you. At least I felt weird about like downloading the governmental top terrorist list and sending it out to everybody. It might be okay, but I just figured it's a lot easier just to go to sam.gov and go to the data access section, and then go to the exclusions extract data package. And by doing that, you just get a CSV file. It's one file, has all this nice data in it, and I'm pretty sure I have it somewhere on my hard drive. Hold on one second here, that we could show it to you. But again, I didn't send it out to everyone because I just a bit nervous of the legality of doing such a thing. Not I think we're all here to help, but yet no one wants to get in trouble for this stuff. So just bear with me 1 minute here. And if not, that one I didn't download, so we'll hold off on that one. But again, you can download it from there, and what that provides is not only the basically the terrorist watch list, which is a really useful one to get, but it also kind of highlights any person that is no longer doing business with the federal government. So then that's something that from an employee profiling point of view, if they're not doing any business with the federal government, kind of odd, let's take a look at that. That could be done through VLOOKUP. Like we talked about the VLOOKUP a few times. You could VLOOKUP address, a name, etc. I just might, filter the address or name to just the first few characters. Here's another one. I actually, again, didn't want to go out and sign into this, but this is a great way to take a look at employees and whether or not they're valid, and that is to go out to the IRS TIN matching service. It's a little bit hard to get set up for. You almost have to do it personally, which might scare people to personally be on the hook for it. But I guess the theory being, and I've used it many times, you can upload like TIN numbers. It'll tell you whether or not it's valid, invalid, etc. And what's really nice about that is, again, you could find employees that are ghost employees or such pretty quickly. Now, this one, it's not so much from an employee profiling point of view, but I thought it was really cool, and it was sort of the basically the chiefs of state, the CIA chiefs of state. It's world leaders, and a lot of people that have Foreign Corrupt Practice Act type activity, they're using this list because they're worried about giving a governmental official a lot of money. Now, let me kind of show you the data for this one because it's sort of, it's a little more interesting. I did not send it out to you again. This gives you the link, and I'm being really particular here, but notice how it says click here in the middle of the screen, version for prior years. That's what you want. I mean, otherwise you're kind of clicking around and clicking on each letter to figure out the person's name, but it's just not the same. It doesn't work as well, and it's kind of a pain. So the chief of staff, though, that analysis, what we'll do is I will show you that data. What we do is you basically get a PDF document, and it's a document that has all of, down below here, the countries, the title, bear with me, and the person's name. And it could be anything. I mean, I'll just kind of quickly go. It starts with A and kind of continues on here. I don't know. We're up to Indonesia, So, I mean, you can kind of see president, vice president, etc. It's been updated as of January 2015. Now, what I did, there are a few options. Because it's in PDF form, it's not the best. What I did was I did boot up a little ACL script that Michael Kiefer, or excuse me, I take that, Michael Kiefer is a great ACL user, but Michael Hosing had set out there, and Michael had kind of created this really nice script, and he created it for the September 2013. And if you want the script, let me know. I'm happy to send it to you. I just didn't put it in there because I figured a lot of people, may not know what ACL software is and be more focused on Excel. So I didn't want to confuse everyone. But we did, kind of note this. And if you know anything about ACL, I'll run this right now just for kind of for grins. And let me just close this up. If I kind of run this script, without knowing very much, it essentially brings it right in, and now I have kind of a listing of for that. Actually, we could probably even do we'll just scroll down for now. It's probably a lot easier. Go back to that Indonesia, and there it is, and we'll just kind of highlight into this. What you end up getting is kind of a listing of the country. I guess the date it was updated, and then the title as well as the person's name over on the right hand side. You could do a keyword search with these names and kind of look throughout data files. You never know, like it'll show up in a Word document or a PDF or an email. You make sure that you make a payment to, kind of thing. So all of that can be done with that active data product that we talked about before, using these names. So I mean, it's something to look at. Getting back to employee profiling, I still think it does have relevance. I mean, if we do have matches on the AP side or the T&E side with people, like we're bringing people out to functions and we're paying for it on the company dollar, and they are politically exposed persons, then that's fine. But we need to kind of then profile that person a lot higher on the scoring list than someone that does not present that kind of activity. We kind of have the lists here. Let me just continue on here. I think we're kind of up to one of our last polling questions. I wanted to show you this really because these are great watch lists and things to look at. These three in particular, and the OFAC list is really more called the exclusion list because it has everybody that's not doing business with the U.S. federal government. I know that there are other lists out there by like the UK Bribery Office and others, but with all that said, let me bring up this next polling question and say which watch list was not mentioned. So which one was not mentioned in our review? Is it IRS TIN matching, CIA watch list, bear with me, I lost the poll, sorry, super bad person list, or SAM.gov OFAC list? And so far, no questions coming in, other than kind of a video lapse here and there, but we seem to be good. But again, if there are any questions or thoughts, feel free to give me a call. Or sorry, put that in the questions. Sorry. And just on that last thing on the ACL file, again, if anyone does want that, let me know. I'm happy to send that out. I probably will even send you to the link in LinkedIn where I found it, and I talked to Michael a little bit about it, and he very, very helpful guy. I see that most of you have voted so far, so I'm just going to keep that open for like 10 more seconds, and we will carry on. We're almost done. We're just going to talk about scoring, last, and kind of putting it all together, now that we kind of have it all. So just keep that out there for another 5 seconds here. I'll close that poll and share it with everybody. And as you can see here, the super bad list is correct. That is not something I looked at. I think it's a movie, but not a list. And let us continue on once I get us back here to my screen. And we should be good. All right, so last but not least is kind of taking a look at coding and scoring. And I know I've alluded to it about, 10 times today. And I still feel like what I had done a long time ago is I wrote a book called the Proactively Detecting Fraud Using Computer-Assisted Audit Reports. And it was a research paper for the IIA. And I had all these reports in there, and some of them are pretty good. But what I figured out was that if I combined those reports and found people that showed up on multiple reports, that had just a much better chance of really finding a problem than if not. And therefore, you can kind of kill more birds with one stone, kind of combine things together. Even if you pick an entry, like I have somebody that's walking through sales entries at a company, and they're just walking through a few of them. But the beauty of that is, if we pick one that is a duplicate sale that has a round dollar amount that was posted on a weekend, even though it's one sample unit to walk through, you're kind of getting a real bang for your buck on the sample unit. You're looking at some of the more severe things that are happening. This is an example of how you could score the results and kind of look at maybe vendors or even from an employee point of view. Let's say it added up the entire employee score. That would allow you to kind of highlight things from a value and risk perspective. We're going to talk about though how VLOOKUP, once again, VLOOKUP is going to be used to kind of bring all this stuff together so that we can make sense of it. And what I'm doing there is I basically have like a code number, like supplier number in this case, but it would be like employee number, I guess. And for doing that, you then have a variety of reports that are on other tabs in the data. So as I open up Excel, let me just kind of show you this. So here is the data that we were just looking at. We kind of have the supplier number here, and then the report scores for each report there. And what I'm trying to get at is to kind of ultimately get to this final score. And let's take a look here. So over here I have worksheet number 1, and I have supplier number, which again, it could be employee number. It doesn't have to be supplier number. And then kind of having that report score for each one. Most of them are 0. And then when you have a transaction showing up on this report, you give it a 0.1 or a 1 or whatever you'd like. It really almost doesn't matter that much. Once you've done that, you really can create a VLOOKUP scenario where in this case I'm VLOOKUPing A2, which is the supplier number, and I'm doing it to these other tabs in the schedules and providing us, just as you can see here, we were kind of highlighting this section here, and then that was part of the VLOOKUP. Now when we have a match, we put that score here, and then that is like a VLOOKUP that is going to this one. Report 2 is based on that worksheet number 2. Report 3 is worksheet number 3, etc. And ultimately you get to this point where they're all VLOOKUPed to the report, and then that's added up at the end to get a final score. So the VLOOKUP command is really kind of pulling this all together in Excel. If I do this in ACL, I tend to join the files together essentially, or access, you relate tables together. But anyway, in Excel, it's VLOOKUP. And in this case, we're more or less bringing together all the scores. Sorry, my mouse. And I just wanted to kind of show you, last but not least, we did show a couple of examples of the graphing. And in this particular case, so, in bear with me one second. So what I'm doing here, and just kind of, let me just bear with me one second here. I just want to get the right one for you. Okay, so one of the things that you could do, I just wanted to, there we go. So what I kind of wanted to show here was one of the things that you could think about doing, and it's a little hard to show it here, but we'll just kind of take this example here. One of the thoughts you could have is if an item shows up, let's imagine you had 7 reports, and you scored, this may be a little hard, but if you scored each transaction in those reports, so I'm not doing it by employee number and if the employee showed up on the report, but I'm doing it now by the transactions for that employee. What you can do is set up a scoring in a way where you can divide the number of transactions by the score. So if we had 7 reports, and we scored every transaction on the 7 reports, you would kind of get to this point where if I showed up on all 7 reports, I get a 1 for that transaction. And just keeping this very simple here, if for example we had 5 transactions, and of the 5 transactions, 3 of them showed up on the report, and we got kind of on every report, and we got a full 1 for those. And then we got 2 transactions that showed up on maybe half of the reports, or something. So we'll kind of do a 2.5. And of course it's not going to calculate because I have to put hopefully an equal sign. Hopefully it'll calculate. Okay, so I get a score 4 out of 5, which is an 80% score ratio. So it's kind of like the score to the number of transactions. And I say this because I think going at the transaction level is a lot better, and making a score ratio, because if you say 80% of these vendors' transactions are showing up, or these employee transactions are showing up on all of my reports, but 80% of them are showing up on every report, I definitely want to look at that vendor. So I did want to show you that. With that said, I mean, you can obviously kind of take it and take the score ratio and do it by day and say, there's a huge day. There are various other graphs here that we kind of created. But anyway, that I think the graphing side of it isn't so much the key as kind of thinking, am I going to score based on whether or not the employee has that attribute, or whether or not it's in the transactions themselves. And with that, let me get to the last polling question of the day, and then we have some concluding slides. If you have any questions, this is a really good time. And the question is, what function is used to align the scores in the scoring analysis? Is it mod, find, mid, or VLOOKUP? And as most of you are entering that, again, great time for questions. We're sort of at the end here. We'll kind of come back and have some final closing thoughts and cool things that we're doing coming up in the next time frame. But we do appreciate you coming today. You will be getting, obviously, a polling after all of this on how we did. And but we'll just want to get through this final polling question before that. On an overall level, again, we kind of went through a variety of ways that you can score an employee, profile them, and I think some of the basic ones with the ACFE to the more advanced of like using word analytics is all something that you can do. And gosh, yeah, that download from Active Data is really quite nice. It works really well. In kind of just looking at the results here of the poll, we're almost done. I'll just leave it out there for just another second or two for people to sign in. And I will now close that poll and share it. And the VLOOKUP was the correct answer. So VLOOKUP, most of you got that, and that's it. And I just need to, hold on here, hide that poll. And we're back. So yeah, I mean, if you do have any questions, this is kind of the time to do it. With that said, I know there's a lineup for 2015. I think, it may even be easier just to go out to fraudresourcenet.com, and take a look for the courses that are out there, and this being one of them. I believe there's a Fraud Resource Net subscription offer where you can get data mining for payroll fraud. Once you sign up for Fraud Resource Net, as Peter had said, it's one of the top archives for fraud information. And also the WCC Fighter, White Collar Crime Fighter. And you can obviously sign up now, I think even by clicking this link in the slide. I think it works, and really has a lot of information. I've been reading that for years, and just tons of really interesting, useful case studies that you can follow that I find really useful. And Audit Software Videos is a website that I'm maintaining, and it's basically has about 70 hours of these Excel and other types of training videos. They're broken up, they're bite-sized, but there's no CPE. So if CPE is something that you want, we don't have that. But definitely something to look at. And with all that said, we do thank you for today. If there are any closing questions, we wanted to attend to that. But we're through all of our polling questions and the presentation. I didn't know, Peter, if you had any final closing thoughts.
Well, I certainly do want to not let you go without thanking you profusely for putting together what was not, a run-of-the-mill presentation here. This is fairly cutting-edge material. I think everyone would agree, and hopefully everyone did receive the link that Rich provided through me, through an email from me yesterday, to the data which Rich was making reference to throughout his presentation. If not, do feel free to get in touch with me at pgoldman@fraudresourcenet.com, and I'll make sure you get that. I did want to remind everyone that you will see, as Rich mentioned, a short survey as you exit the webinar, and we value that input from you, so that please take a second to finish up with that. And the next webinar we have, as Rich said, there is a full lineup on fraudresourcenet.com. The next one is on the 18th of March, and Rich will be joining us for that as well. And we look forward to having you join us again. Feel free to sign up at any time starting now for that webinar and any others that may appeal to you on the screen Rich is showing you now. And beyond that, Rich, any final points to make?
I think probably just you get as much data as you can. I from a big data point of view, there's been a lot of talk about big data, and I think it's almost like the analogy. There's so much instead of us going to the stars, trying to kind of go to Mars or Venus or something like that. It's almost better to at times just to look at what's in our oceans, and I think right now, a lot of the big data that people are doing in this unstructured and structured data analytics, I think it's just looking at their own data. It's not so much going out and finding some new data feed to get, but rather just kind of looking at it. And I just think of no other way. I mean, unfortunately, people commit fraud, not computers. People do it. So unfortunately, you kind of have to profile on the person at some point, to see who's doing this. So at some point you get to that point. I'm just saying here, proactively do it, and use the data as a proactive tool. But thank you, Peter. No, that's all I got. And yeah, I know the video will be helpful future-wise too. If people kind of missed a step or what have you, it's easy to go back to the video and kind of catch up.
Right. Thank you for reminding me of that. There will be, as I said at the outset, a email follow-up coming to you with a link to that video, which is a recording of this webinar, so that you can review any portions of it that you need to. And any questions that do come up for Rich in the aftermath or conclusion of the webinar, feel free to forward to me, and I'll make sure he gets them, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them. So with that, thanks again, Rich. We look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. We hope you got an abundance of useful and actionable information from this fascinating presentation, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot.